Hi there, I'm Charles Babalola and I'm your instructor for today. In this part of the course, we'll continue to explore some of the ways UX designers build empathy with the users of the product they're designing for. We'll start with user stories, which are fictional one-sentence stories that connect the needs of a potential user to a specific action and benefit. After that, you will learn about User Journey Map, a tool used by UX designers to understand the obstacles a user faces while interacting with a product. Lastly, we'll explore what user flows are. Now that we all know about persona, it's time for some stories. So, what are user stories? A user story is a fictional one-sentence story told from a personal point of view to inspire and inform design decisions. It introduces the user, lays out an obstacle, and states their ultimate goal. Don't get confused if you notice some UX designers refers to these as scenarios or user cases. They mean the same thing. Now, let's check out the goal, structure, and benefits of user stories. The user story expands on the persona and deepens your understanding of a user group. Here are some cool things a user story can do for you. User stories prioritize design goals. If you have a lot of user needs to consider, user stories determine which ones are the most critical to resolve. A good user story can inspire empathetic design decisions by making our approach user-centered, also known as user-centric. User stories also unite the team around a clear goal. Finally, user stories personalize pitches to stakeholders. You aren't just presenting your design update ideas, you are demonstrating how the updates will help specific types of people. So, how do you write a user story? Like a classic short story, user stories have a hero with an ultimate goal and a conflict that keeps them from conquering that goal. To write a user story, we follow this simple formula. As a type of user, I want to the action so that benefits. All that is left now is filling in the missing pieces. Type of user describes who we are designing for. Action is what the user hopes will happen. And finally, benefits is why the user wants the action to happen. This formula keeps the user centered, actionable, and clear. Remember, this is the way to write user story, the simple formula to write user story. I will recap. As a type of user, I want a certain type of action. So that I can benefit from it. Now let's take a quick quiz. At this point, you could pause the video to understand the question and digest it. Which of the following user story is complete? The first option, I want high quality tools so that I can create desirable works of art. Option B, as a team manager, want to streamline administrative processes so that my employees remain productive. As a teacher, which is the third option, I want access to more reading resources for my students. Which do you think is more complete? Let's see. Well, it's the second option. As a team manager, that is a type of user. Action is want to streamline administrative processes, and the benefit is so that my employees remain productive. Okay, so now let's think about a user story to an example we stated earlier from the user persona session we had before. As a dog owner, I want to trust my dog walker so that I can hire them for regular dog walks. So now you know what a user story is, why it is important, and how it is structured. Let's transition into user journey map. A user journey is a series of experiences a user has as they achieve a specific goal. User journey is built of the personas and stories you already have created. They help you think and feel like the user, which is super important. If you can't put the user shoes, you put yourself in the user shoes, you can't be sure that your design will really help them. Before you start the user journey, you need a user journey map. A journey map is just what it sounds like, an illustration of what the user goes through to achieve their goals. Think of it like reading a book. If the persona is your character, the user story is your plot, and the user journey is your story outline. Imagine we want to drive to a beach for a swim. We can use a map on our phone to get an overview of the best route. We know our starting point and our end point. So we go for a drive. Now we are on our way to the beach. Oops, looks like there is a traffic jam ahead. Luckily, the map gives us a detour route to avoid the traffic. Map helps drivers avoid obstacles along their routes. The same applies to user journey map. A user journey map helps UX designers to create obstacle-free paths for users. A journey map reduces the impact of designer bias, which you might remember as the tendency for the designer to design according to their own needs and wants instead of the users. Creating a user journey map lets you thoroughly document the entire sequence of events and interactions a user experiences, including the user interaction with your design. That way, you can really focus on how a specific persona, not you, thinks and feels at every step of the journey. User journey map also highlights new pain points. For example, let's say your persona, Tiana, is biracial. Her user journey is filling out her census info online. Everything is going well until it's time for Tiana to select a race from the drop-down menu. Suddenly, she hits a roadblock. There is no option for her to identify herself as both black and Asian. That's a big pain point. If you if you yourself aren't biracial, you might not have predicted this problem. But by creating the persona of Tiana, giving her a story, and mapping out a user journey using a user journey map, you are able to clearly identify the issues she's experiencing and improve the design. The final key benefit of journey mapping is it identifies improvement opportunities. In Tiana's example, you could add an option in the menu for users to write in their own racial identity, or maybe you could add another field to the drop-down menu for multiracial citizens. Improving the user experience here can make a big difference. So, how do we map out a user journey? Let's say our persona, Peter, comes from a town of 400 people in rural Mississippi. He uses a wheelchair to get around and is visiting New York for the very first time. He wants to fulfill his dream of going all the way to the top of the Empire State Building. How do we map out his journey? To start, identify the first task the user needs to complete. In this case, Peter needs to find a subway route that will take him to the Empire State Building. Next, list all the things the user needs to do to reach their goal. Here is a list of Peter's main tasks. Task 1 is to determine the subway line and route to take. Task 2 is to find the nearest station with wheelchair accessibility. Task 3 is to buy a ticket. Task 4 is to find the right platform and make sure the train is headed towards the Empire State Building and not away from it. Task 5 is to board the subway. And finally, task 6 is to find the right exit. The next action in mapping a user journey is describing all the smaller things the user must accomplish before graduating to the next main task. Here is what it might look like for Peter. That's it. You got Peter all the way to the Empire State Building. Your work here is done. Well, not exactly. You've completed Peter's physical journey, but you still need to consider his emotional journey too. The third action in mapping a user journey is identifying the user's likely emotions as they go from task to task. For example, imagine how Peter might feel the first time he looks at the subway line map. He might be confused and intimidated. Or imagine that Peter has purchased his ticket and is trying to get to the right platform. He can't use the stairs, so he'll need to find an elevator or ramp. The elevator might not be working, so he has to find a ramp. This experience could make Peter feel overwhelmed and make him feel excluded. There is one final action in our user journey map exercise. Once we identify the user emotions, we can then identify opportunities to improve is user experience. This is where user journey mapping can really enhance our UX design. Without mapping the actions of Peter's journey, it might never occur to us to add an accessibility key to the map to help users with wheelchairs navigate the subway stations more easily. Here's what a user journey map looks like for Peter. Now you know how user journey is built of user stories and persona. You also know the benefit of user journey map and you understand how to create a user journey map. Up next, we'll show how to create user flows. Designing an effective product requires a full understanding of users and their needs. There's a lot that you can do with knowledge about the people you're designing for. You can even predict user needs before they know what they want or need. One example of predicting user needs is a process that happens when you order food from a restaurant. The cashier asks questions about the condiments for your burger, whether you want a side of fries, and if you like a water or soda to drink. The cashier is anticipating your needs as a user and meeting those needs, possibly before you recognize those needs yourself. As a UX designer, you can anticipate user needs when interacting with your product. A clear, simple way to outline this process is creating a user flow. A user flow is the path taken by a typical user on an app or website. They can complete a task from start to finish. UX designers often outline the user flow before they start to design because it can help to picture how users will move through the app or website. In other words, before you design screens of an app, you need to understand how users can effectively move through the app overall. You need to determine what actions will the user take in the app, what decisions will users make, what screens will user experience after taking action and making a decision. The goal is to map how users achieve a specific goal as they move through a product. That way, we have a clear overview of the product functionality before the design process begins. To be clear, user flows don't include polished content that will appear in the final product. Instead, they include shapes that represent different interactions. These shapes don't always have universal meaning, but let's review a few of these shapes and how we'll be interpreting them through this process now. Circles indicate the action users take when moving through a product design. In other words, circles show steps that must be taken to complete a task from start to finish. For the user flow of a dog walker app, actions might include opening the app, clicking on a dog walker's profile, and booking a dog walker app. Diamonds represent points in the user flow where users must ask a question and make a decision. The diamond user make will either move them forward through the flow or back to an earlier part of the flow. For the user flow of a dog walker app, a decision could be choosing whether or not to book the dog walker whose profile is being reviewed. Rectangles indicate the screens of a digital product that users will experience while completing tasks. For the user flow of a dog walker app, screens might include a home page or a booking confirmation page. Finally, lines provide direction through the user flow based on each user decisions. Lines with arrows tie everything together and display the flow of information. Solid lines indicate forward direction through the user flow, and the dotted lines indicate backward direction or returning to a previous page. Let's take a look at a practical application of them in a potential user flow for our dog walker app. Tada! Here is what a user flow could look like for a dog walker app. At the beginning of the user flow, the first action is represented by a circle. The action in this case is the user opening the app. The next line is drawn to indicate that the user is moving forward to the next element. A screen that shows the user the home page. Since this is a screen, it is represented by a rectangle. Now the user has to make a choice about moving towards another screen. That action is represented by a circle. The user chooses to browse dog walkers, which takes them to the next screen. This is a screen that represents a list of available dog walkers, so it is represented by another rectangle. After that, the user flow moves on to the user selecting a dog walker rather. Once a dog walker is selected, the user flow lands on the rectangle for the dog walker profile. Next up is the first decision the user has to make. This is a diamond. Here, the user must decide if they would like to book the dog walker whose profile they are currently looking at. If they decide to book, the user follows the yes arrow down to the appointment confirmation screen. If the user decides not to book, the user flow follows the no arrow back to the dog walker profile screen. Our user is moving on to the rectangle appointment confirmation screen. So we'll follow that with a solid line, and this completes the user flow. That's it. Now you know what a user flow is and how to use some of the elements that create them. Let's talk about the task. For full-time and part-time, the tasks are the same. Okay. What's the task? We are to create a user story and user flow based on the ideas you have come up with from your user research. You have some resources here of templates if you're using FigJam that you can duplicate and copy into the file you will be submitting. But I will show you just exactly how you can do that. Going into Figma, I will click this button, new FigJam file. Remember, we are submitting a FigJam file, not Figma, a FigJam file or a mirror app file. So I'm going to create a new FigJam file. Cool, our FigJam file has been created. Now, I will go back to the question to look at the first template. Yeah, I brought the question up. You see the first one, user stories on FigJam. Yeah, that's the first template. I will click it to go to the template for user stories. Yes, this is the template. What I will do is come here where you see my mouse, just click duplicate and duplicate it for you. Now I will drag over everything to highlight everything, or press Ctrl A or Command A. And now what I'll do is press Ctrl C to copy it, then go to the previous FigJam file, the empty one that I created earlier, the one I'll be submitting. I'll go there and then I will paste what I just copied into it. Now let's go back to the question. We'll do the same for the second template, user flow. I'll click on it. Here we go. Now I will duplicate it. I will highlight everything, drag over everything. Cool. I copy it, Ctrl C or Command C using Mac. Then go back to that FigJam file that I will be submitting and paste it there. That's it. Congratulations on coming this far. In the next class, we'll talk about wireframing and low fidelity prototypes. See you there.